Morning, SOC 100 crew. Let's do this. Morning, everyone. Good afternoon as well, too. Evening to the international crew. Those of you that are across the pond working on all this stuff. Good to see everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the day, wherever you might be. We're back. We're back with SOC 100. Gonna be a big day. Big, huge day. Huge day, actually, today. Huge. Lots to cover, lots to go over. How's everyone's week been? We watched the fight last night. And Bearded, thanks for the sub as well, too. Good to have you back with us. Let's see who we got in chat. KSCI. Let me pull up the humans around here. Cool, alright, let's see. Alright, Bad Toy, Bearded, CI, Cybersec, Lynn, DT, EDU, Finac, Joe Emp, Karina, Kim Fried, Pariah, Patricia, R Double, Cyber Saiyan is with us. Damn, power levels over 9,000 in the chat, and Trap Win. Cool. Crazy how the fight was free and yeah, that's right, Bearded. Don't know what was going on with that. It was, yeah, they kind of just like walked. I don't know. I was thinking, I mean, he's 58. The fight was at what, like almost 12 p.m. Eastern. I don't know what time it was over in Texas at the time of, but that's really late. Like they both even looked tired. That was like a really, really late fight. I don't know what was going on. Serrano, yeah, that was questionable. Definitely got robbed. Fought tooth and nail for that. Don't know what was going on there. That's going to be, I don't know if that's, maybe they just wanted like a rematch. Maybe they just wanted some more publicity. I don't know, but something was questionable about that call. I think everyone saw that. The crowd saw it. The announcer saw it. Pretty much everyone saw that. I think even the other girl was having trouble saying that she won as well too. I think she was just happy to get out of it, out of the fight. She looked like she was just getting pounded. Eric, good morning. Good to have you with us. I know you hopped in last night. It's good to have you with us tonight. Or rather today. Yeah, we stayed up to watch a 50-year-old fight a 27-year-old at midnight. I know, right? Like, should have just went to bed. If they're gonna do a fight like that again, like, geez, do it at like 7 p.m. or something. Like, that's a pretty prime time. These late fights. I don't know. But that's that, I guess. So, SOC 100 time, networking day. Back to studies. The week is over. Today. So what are we going to go and look at today? Let's take a look. Got to change that title. We're no longer doing a ping to Nmap. Should be map to Wireshark. We're going to try to get our way there. Okay, cool. Screen's just about set up. Cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some updates. SOC 100 updates. Okay. So I made some adjustments to the initial schedule, at least up until before Christmas and the holidays, just so that everyone's tracking. We are going to do a couple extra streams over here. So I think we had some time off towards, I think, the 24th, 30th streams. And also some time off in like middle of January. So I've actually went ahead and I've populated those with more streams for us to do. I wanted to give us a little bit more time. Now, I'm probably going to do like a call out for maybe after the 15th. So let's continue on full steam ahead, full stream ahead. And we're going to just continue getting through SOC 100. Then we're going to open up with a little bit of SOC 100-2. That way you have some of the initial starting streams. And then you've got a good amount of time you can work on the content as well before we start actually covering it live. It's some good time to catch up to in the SOC 100-1 series of things. So I would probably, I'd like to do a call out and just like a vote, get everyone in Discord and email and do another forum submission just so I can see everyone's preferences to see, like, do you still want to do 10-2 format? Maybe we should do them like 10-2 with like a good like half an hour break in between or something. I don't know. So there's some questions I kind of want to ask and see how everyone's feeling about the streams, preferences, and then see what we can accommodate going into the new year. So that'll be the time that we do that announcement. Yeah, I kind of like 10-2 as well too, KS. It works well for me. I mean, ultimately, I can try my best to accommodate. It's not like I can start doing this at like 4 in the morning kind of thing. 10-2 works really well for me, and so the majority vote, I think it was like 65 or 67% of the forum submissions also had voted for this, and then it was like 20 something for the evening. So it was a pretty big disparity. Yeah, exactly, KS. That's exactly it. Wake up, crush some study work. That's the best time to get things done. And then take a break, hit the gym, play some good games, play some vids, get some Steam Achievos. So we'll see, though. Definitely want to try to accommodate as best I can and kind of get some feedback as well, too. See what everyone likes, what they don't like, and just try to improve. That's really it. Eric, thanks for the follow as well, too. Hope everyone's got their coffee. So that's the plan. So today and tomorrow is more networking. Like I said, we spend the most amount of time because this is the most critical area to really get your bearings on. You're going to have plenty of time to develop your Windows and Linux abilities as you go on, but networking is sort of the first major hurdle to spend the most amount of time on because everything layers on top of that. Bearded gives you some time before life makes a to-do list. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Responsibilities and such, you know, starts to kick in later. You can stretch out your responsibilities in the morning, right? I'll do it later kind of thing. And then, yeah, so then next weekend, November 23rd, actually, so DT, Doug is in chat. He's one of the SOC 100 contributing instructors over here, and we've set aside some time for him to give a full stream next Saturday. And Doug's going to do a good walkthrough of some additional content. It's not even inside the course. This is bonus content, and then the stream will be inside of the course afterwards. But this is going to be a bit of a deeper dive into some Wireshark analysis and protocol and malware traffic analysis. As I understand, Doug is cooking it up. So that'll be a bonus stream next weekend. That's going to be pretty cool. And then we're going to kick off in Windows Enterprise next Sunday. So that's where we're going to be at. Things. That's kind of the plan. And then the following week, we're going to continue with the Windows Enterprise. And I had to... So the flow is going to be a little different over here compared to the modules. We have it set aside for December 1st for Chris to come in, another contributing instructor. He's going to He's going to come in and do the career prep 1. We're going to talk about like the home lab and portfolio and such. And then we're going to do the help desk stuff afterwards that. So the following weekend. So a little bit of a change, but at least this kind of accommodates everything. And the help desk continues right off the Windows Enterprise module. So the career prep in between is not going to really disjoint it that much. It's not like new content. It's not new technical stuff. It's like building your portfolio. And then December 14th, before the holidays, we will open up, like I said, the SOC 100-2 course and kick off one of the most important modules after networking is governance, risk, and compliance, GRC. We're going to talk a lot about that because cybersecurity is not all just technical. There's a lot of human elements to this. It's very adversarial in nature, right? There's defenders and attackers, and who are those defenders and attackers? They are humans. So there's a strong human component to this, and as we all know, social engineering, we hear about it all the time, and phishing and scams, that's a huge threat surface. It's responsible for a lot of incidents, so that is directly tied in to the governance side as well. So, some updates. What do y'all think? Exciting? Let me know. Let me know. Any questions on that? N2. Yeah, good. N4. Yeah, definitely bearded. Agree. Cool. Karina's happy. Zeno's happy. Got some happy people. Tiny happy people. Alright. So it's time. Agreed. Yeah, I can see already again, majority in chat kind of tended to as well. It's reflective of the scores. I mean, not scores, but the form submissions. Okay. So today we're going to start off with, we need to talk a little bit about NAT and PAT and ports. We've kind of covered everything else at this point, and the content has additional self-paced content to reinforce, of course. So we're going to open up with a little bit of lecture on NAT and PAT and ports. That should kind of cover the first little bit. We'll take a break after that and then dive into it, because that's the final piece of the puzzle. I think a lot of you have seen how these things are working, but one thing that we didn't cover on the NAT and PAT side is, this is what it is, but how does your IP address really get out of the network from a private address to a public address? And then vice versa, how does it get in from a public IP address to a private IP address? And that's all the magic of network address translation and port address translation, which is NAT and PAT. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to do a bit of a deeper discussion around ports. We've only talked about it more so conceptually and at a reference level, kind of using that little diagram of entering a conference where people are going to different rooms and speaking in languages and protocols. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that because there are some more specific things to be aware of, like well-known ranges, registered, ephemeral, and such. So that'll be the plan for the first little bit. Let's kick that off. The gym and games balance out all the studying. Karina, absolutely. Love the Bart Simpson. 100%. That early Simpsons is like still greatest. KS, yeah, you gotta stay healthy. Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I think so some like side advice outside of the networking side, you know, you're talking about healthiness and wellness. I mean, I can tell you kind of like firsthand, it doesn't really matter how much you spend on your computer chair. Go out And, you know, like when I first started working in tech, like early on, and I got a remote job and stuff and I was working remotely, I saved up. I got one of those nice Herman Miller chairs. Really good. Cost a pretty penny. I was like, you know what? I can just sit on this thing all day. And, well, before I knew it, I started to get... It didn't matter. Like, you're still going to get tightness on the neck. My forearms were kind of bothering me, my lower back. Like, it doesn't matter. These chairs are just there to sort of support and help you for the time that you have to sit. But you still have to get up. You still need to take breaks. You still need to move. You still need to be physically active. And I kind of learned that lesson early on. So a little side advice, get a chair that is comfortable for you, but don't buy a chair thinking like it's going to solve all of your I guess, sedentary related physical ailments that might come with it. It's good to have a good chair for the time you have to sit, but you do have to move. That's some side advice. It's not just for the physical side, but the mental side, to give your body and mind a break, to see different things, different stimulus, see distances up close, like from monitor, like go outside, see trees and kind of distance and such. It does make a huge difference. It also relieves some pressure, like on the internal cavity and such, when you're kind of sitting and always hunched over. Like I know friends that worked and they developed nerve impingement just from like their shoulders being caved in all the time, from like the nerve that goes through like the shoulder and underneath through the chest and back to the neck. So like it doesn't matter. Like you do have to move and you have to make sure like your back is strong. This is side advice, and I am serious about this. I'm not just trying to say, hey, go lift, bro. Like not that. I'm just saying like you just have to be physically active. That could just be walking. It could be going for a jog. It could be playing tennis. It could just be standing up and just generally moving. And yeah, so Eric's saying put a timer. 100%. Yeah. Find your physical activity passion and do that while you're doing all of this. And that's why we take breaks as well too, while we go through the content. Stand up, move. And then I only play ads on the breaks so that I don't have to play ads through the stream when we're actually teaching. So that's kind of why I threw that inside there. Cool. All right. I think that's enough of that. Let's get the old iPad connected. Need to talk about some stuff. So that's up and live. All right, so I'll bring that back up in a moment. So what are we going to talk about today? Getting coffee equals exercise. Yeah, I know, right? Karina, take a break, actually. Yeah, 100%. Like, if you're banging your head against something... What's that quote? Like, walls are there to rest or, like, to lean on, I think. Something like that. Sometimes when you're hitting a wall, it's actually there just for you to lean on and take a rest. Something along those lines, paraphrasing. But that's kind of what it means as well. So let's talk about NAT and PAT. We can find a little example over here. This little image. Then we'll do some visualization as well between us. All right, so let's kind of talk about this stuff right now. Let's start off with network address translation. So effectively, NAT, network address translation. This is what is responsible for having your private IP address within your internal network translated to a public IP address. And the way this kind of works is that, like, your private IP addresses that are being handed out, remember we talked about like the DHCP, your router is handing out IP addresses to your network, and you can define those settings. You can use like a class C address space, like the 192.168.1.0 kind of thing. 1.0 kind of thing. Your router hands those IP addresses out to your, I guess, your internal network. And you can define those settings. You can use like a class C address space, like the 192.168.1.0 kind of thing. Your router hands those IP addresses out to your, I guess, your internal network. And you can define those settings. You can use like a class C address space, like the 192.168.1.0 kind of thing. Your router hands those IP addresses out to your local devices on the network, your phone, your computers, etc. And when your device wants to try and connect to the internet, and remember, routers are layer 3, so they're routing IP addresses, there's kind of an exchange that happens right there. And the router actually will store the private IP address of the request, like the source IP from inside the network, and it will then send the request out into that general internet space. That could be a DNS request, it could be a web server, it could be a number of things, and that's all where the IP addresses are being routed at that time to the destination. So it sends it out to another server. But when it leaves your network, when it kind of passes that demarcation point, and your router is sort of like that last point before it leaves and goes from the cables out, your router is programmed to understand what is your public IP address, which is provided to you by your internet service provider, your ISP. So your router knows that, hey, this IP address it's not on the network. Remember, the router will look and see, hey, is this like another private IP address? Is this another is this maybe like a MAC address that we can hit, and it'll send it back at like a layer 2 level within the local network? But if it's not a class A, B, or C private IP address, the router will then just immediately assume that we have to go outside of our network and connect to external servers. And then from there, it says, actually, hey, the source IP address is actually like the public IP address, which could be like 203.094.12 or something like that. Now, when the request comes back from wherever we had sent it to, it will then be translated back to the private IP address that the router was holding. And so the router is the thing, it's the node in the middle that is storing the source private IP address to the external public IP address, gets the request, and then says, hey, this is the request you wanted, private IP, let me send it back to you now. That's what network address translation actually is. So let's go and look at that. Maybe find one of these little models over here. So as we can see inside this diagram, so you have your private IP addresses over here. On the left-hand side, they make a request. So, and the router says, hey, this is a private IP address. Takes the public IP, sends it out to the internet, and then the internet sends a response back, and the router then sends it back to your private IP address. That's what network address translation is. That's how this all works. Now, if that's not clicking, we've had some references of how this stuff all kind of works. You can think about like that warehouse. You can think about the apartment. You can think about whatever it might be. And inside those warehouses or your apartments, right? Like you have your own building apartment number, and you have maybe like a department number inside the warehouse. So there's like these internal types of addresses. But when communication or mail leaves your apartment or your warehouse, it's registered as the building address or the warehouse address. And then leaves that way, comes back, and then inside is how it actually comes back over to you. So it sort of has like, we talked about like that internal address space. That's the private IP address space. Imagine that being like inside the apartment, inside the warehouse, and all exit mail kind of leaves one way and comes in one way from the exit of the apartment building or the warehouse itself. Does that make sense? I feel like that one's the easiest to understand. Does that make sense though? Wow, there's no way that cooled down that quickly, my drink. Wow. Must be cold in this room. Don't even know. Cool. Okay, making sense. Nice. Yeah, like I said, that one's the easiest one to understand. PAT is a little more complicated. So now we're talking about port address translation. And you can see the problem with this diagram right here, it doesn't mention protocols. And that's where port address translation comes into play. It also provides a meaningful way to understand, because like imagine if 174.221.4 and .3 and .2 in this image. So imagine these three devices all made a request at the same time to this router to the same public IP address of 244.46.1.1. Imagine that all happened at the exact same time. Well, how would the router know how to send it back to the right private IP address? Like, how would it know and not get confused and send it? Maybe if we didn't have ports, essentially, we wouldn't know specifically which of these devices made their individual requests. So the port address translation provides a couple different reasons for of its benefits. It provides a way to label a connection request with a port number for tracking, and it also provides the ability for the port to be routed using a certain protocol. Like if we're making a request on port 80 for HTTP, then we know that we are making an HTTP request. So at like a technical level, what's happening here is, imagine like the first two addresses at this top page were sharing a request, right? Your router will effectively just assign a unique port. And we're going to talk about that next. That's why I said these things kind of line up together, because we have these ephemeral ports. And it provides this ability of session tracking effectively. So let's see if we can find a port address translation. Type from arms in a weird position. Not bad. Actually, don't I have one inside the course itself? Yeah, we can actually just use this one. It's probably a little bit easier. It's the one that we made, I think, ourselves. Everyone can see that, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. So we have these hosts, like hosts A, B, and C on this Class A network. Hits the switch. This is where the layer 2 routing, layer 2 switching will happen between these different hosts. And then it's going to go to the router for external address requesting. So we can see the original packet. So let's say 10.00.5 was making an HTTP request to server 5555.5. We can see here that when we hit the router is going to assign some type of random port. And we have these ports, we're going to talk about it shortly, these ephemeral ports. It's a certain range that the router will just assign at random and kind of grab whatever one it can, and it's going to kind of stamp the request. So the source IP in this case is the bottom right one. 10.00.5 is going to be making a request with port 65430. And it's making the request to 5555. Oh, geez, sorry. It's making, let me make sure that's paused. So it's making the request as an external IP address request, so destination IP, of 5555 on port 80. So that is an HTTP request to the internet. Now, when it leaves the network, the router has actually stamped it again, and it's saying the public IP address of, let's say in this case, 54.28.9.22 is the public IP address. That's the source IP going out to the internet, but the router has also stamped a source port. So there's another separation happening here. And it's saying the new source port is 63559. And it's still going to the same destination IP address of 5.5.5.5 on port 80. And then it comes back the exact same way. And what the router is looking for is, are you sending, is there a matchup in ports effectively at that point? So if I am receiving a request kind of going from right to left, then it should also match coming back. It's looking for the same activity at that point in time. Oh, Doug, I think you are... I'm going to make you VIP so you can actually share links, because you got... a second. Okay. Doug, you should be able to share links again. Go ahead and try that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, we're going to talk about all these in the next little lecture about port. So CI is asking, so with PAT the address should match. Well, what's happening here is when the server responds, so when the server comes back as 5555 on port 80, it's not going to be coming back on port 80. It's going to actually be responding back with the source port that was requested, ideally, in this case. So 63559 is what it wants to match up with. The best way you can think about it, perhaps, think about maybe like if you've worked at an office or you've called an office or like you went to the dentist, right? Or something, right? There's typically this like receptionist or someone that sits in the front. And each employee has like their own extension, right? That you can call and then reach their extension. The router is effectively doing just that at that point for port address translation. If I call from my internal number with my internal extension to dial out, you're going to get a call from the company's phone number. And if I call back in to the company, I'm going to call them back with their public phone number. Excuse me. And then I am going to put the extension in of who I want to contact internally. That's kind of what's happening when we're doing port address translation. So the server is going to respond back and say, hey, wait a minute, you contacted me on port 63559. I'm going to respond back to you on port 63559. So the source IP address coming backwards is going to say 5.5.5.5 port 63559 to that destination of that public IP address. And the router is going to say, okay, yeah, so you're actually sending it to me in port 63559. Cool. All right. That actually internally, which no one outside can see, is going back to port 65430. And I have been storing that information, and I know that that's like the internal extension of the host. So I can send the traffic back over there. So if two devices are sharing the same public IP address, with PAT, the devices should get write information requested based on the port. Correct. Yes. Yes. So the port number is like an additional label. It's like that phone extension for an internal office. If multiple hosts are sharing, like multiple private hosts are sharing the same public IP address, then the router is responsible for adding a port number internally and externally, and then matching up the requests coming back in the network and outside of the network that way. Does that make sense? Is that still clear for you, Eric? Anyone else a little bit confused in that? Cool. Benak is asking, NAT and PAT is done for IP address preservation. It's one way. That is one purpose. It's for IP address preservation at an external level. Because remember, we're limited in IPv4 address space for the public world to use. So we need to have one public IP address for like hundreds of hosts internally. And then those hosts all get routed to the same public IP address using port address translation, stamping them with individual ports. Kind of like how you see on like this internal session table. If 10.0.0.0.5 is requesting out to 555 on port 80, then it's going to have an internal port, and it's going to have a port address translation port on the public side coming out. So you can kind of see going from right over here to left with my mouse cursor. When it hits the public IP address, the local port is 63559, and the local IP is 54.28.9.22. So that's our public IP address in this case. And it's requesting out to the remote IP of 5.5.5.5 on port 80. And then it's going to come back kind of similarly the same way. Joe's saying original packet header, something to something, is the router assigning the ephemeral port 65430 to the host for HTTP requests instead of port 80. Also, he assigns to itself a different ephemeral port number different than the one for the host. Not exactly clear what you're asking over there. Let me read that again, Joe. 1 second. I think because the asterisks are blocked out. Hold on. Let me also... You've been hanging around as well. Let me VIP you as well, because I have it to block. Yeah. Send a message again, Joe? With the IP address inside there? So original packet header 10.00.5, port 65430 to 555 port 80 is the router assigning the ephemeral port 6540 to the host for the HTTP request. I see what you're saying now. Yes, so sort of. So the router, so your internal network request, I might have to actually kind of draw this out, because there's actually like a step happening here in between that might be confusing, I think. So hold on. Yeah, I'm gonna have to draw this out. There isn't really like a good part as well, is there? Maybe this one. Well, actually looks pretty decent. Okay, yeah, cool. I think this one might actually work for what I'm looking for. Let's see. Let me just review it quick, make sure this makes sense. Yep, and then destination. Okay, I think this image actually paints a little bit better of a question and answer for you then. It's effectively just going to be doing this in reverse. So let's walk from port A. I mean, sorry, host A. Definitely need a little more coffee this morning, jeez. Okay, host A on 10.6.6.61 makes a source request of its IP address internally on the local area network. This is its private IP address, a class A address. And it makes a source request of 10.6.6.61 on, let's say, port 22222 to destination 82.6.4.2. So when I go into the browser, that's like me going over here and I'm typing in 82.642. So that's like me saying 82.6.4.2 port 443. Or that's kind of like me also saying HTTPS. This mic a little bit forward. There we go. Google.com. It's kind of like me saying that. That's kind of what's happening right there. Now the router uses this. It's called the translation table, and it's using port address translation at this point in time. All what the router is doing is saying, okay, I don't have 82.6.4.2 on the network because that's a public IP address, and I only route locally with private IP addresses. So the router stamps your request as still on port 2222, and it's going to send that outbound with a new port using your public IP address. So in this case, it'll be 32.8.2.66, and it's just going to assign a random one. And we'll talk more about ephemeral ports. It's going to assign this random port on, let's just say in this case, on 7777. And then it's going to have the original destination request still stamped on the request going to 82.6.4.2 on port 443. So you can see your request on your home network still goes all the way to the server. All the way. Now, this is going to happen exactly in reverse. The server on 82.6.4.2 is going to send a request back, or rather a response in this case. It's going to send a response back to your public IP address, and it's going to say source, which is 82.6.4.2. So source IP address now becomes the public IP address of this server over here on port 443. It's still the same. And it's going to say the destination is now 32.8.2.66 on port 777. That goes back to your ISP router, like that connection over there. And your router knows, okay, I'm getting a response back on port 7777. I know internally that that actually goes to port 2222 to IP address 10.6.6.61. So it just reverses the entire response back using the same ports in the same sequence, but flipped. And that's how your host can hit a server externally, because your router sits right in the middle and it's just flipping this connection back and forth. Does that kind of clear that up, Joe? And anyone else? Does that make more sense looking at this image now? We're basically walking from left to right and then right to left. Okay, cool. Think of the router as a bridge, if that's still a little unclear. Just a bridge. Sits right in the middle of all that. And the router is doing this for, one, yes, preservation of public IP address space. It's also doing it for security. And it's also doing it for optimization. Finax saying, just to clarify, the port number in the outgoing packet is overwritten by the router, not in an addition to the packet. Correct. Yeah, it's not. It's a separate request. It's not overwriting anything. Your request internally from host A is actually only going as far to the router, and then it stops. And then your router makes a request on your behalf. And then the server responds back to the router, and the router sends another response back to you. Karina's saying, are all the ports ephemeral except for the one attached to the destination address? So let's talk about ports in just a second, and I'll talk more about ephemeral and such in just a moment. So bear with me over there, Karina. I want to just make sure that we get the flow understood first, and then we're going to come back. So Finax is saying, so the packet is dropped. No, not necessarily. It's still the same sequence of traffic. But the router takes the request and it changes the source IP and source port. But it's actually the same request, like the same sequence. And it has to be. It has to be, because if it wasn't, then we would never be able to establish TCP connections that we talked about. TCP connections, you have to remember, every single time we make a request, it's going to have things like sequence numbers and flags and all that stuff. So it's not actually going to be dropped per se, unless there's like a mismatch. So maybe like the ports don't add up on the response back and forth, or there's a firewall. Then the packet will actually be completely dropped at that point, and then a new request has to be made. So my next question, thanks, Karina. Yeah. questions coming up on flow of things. I want to make sure that fin is good as well too, because that's an important question to understand, and make sure that everyone else understands as well too. The packet is not being dropped when it hits the translation table. Is everyone clear on that? Unless there was like a mismatch in ports happening here, or a firewall, the request is not dropped. Oh, Finax clear. Is everyone else clear that the packet is just continuously forwarded both ways? I just need to make sure we're all clear on that. As long as you can understand this flow, that's the most important part at this time. Cool. Okay, good. All right. So, good on that point. Now kind of going back up to the question, Karina's question. So, are all the ports ephemeral except for the one attached to the destination address? The vast majority of the time, yes. And I'm going to say, like, it should be. It like, the vast majority, like 99% of the time, when we're talking about external routing. So when we hit a public IP address, yes. Not seeing any other questions come up, so I think we're going to kind of move on from here on this point, and I think we can talk a little bit about ports and stuff. That might make things a little bit easier to understand as well too, because we're dealing with these weird numbers that keep changing, which, while ephemeral on the public side, yes, internal is not so much the same story. The diagram is symmetrical, route forward equals route back. Exactly. Exactly. It should always be matching up to this, like 99% of the time, unless there's some type of strict external configuration happening, which is going to be extremely rare. There might be some like old legacy technology, I don't know. There could be some type of like security restrictions, firewalls. That's where you get into some more advanced stuff, and that's well beyond what we need to cover right now. So when we start talking about like firewalls, proxies, load balancers, these things, like there are just more nodes that can sit in between requests, that they might actually change the ports around and do more port address translation. But for all intents and purposes, we should be using ephemeral port ranges for when we hit this type of like external request activity going in and out. We're going to clarify a little bit more. Cool. So we're good with that. Now let's talk more about ports themselves. So we talked about it quite a bit. Using that little conference room. Kind of idea. I don't have the diagram here. Pull that up. section. Cool. So, the whole concept of ports is for one purpose. So Beard is saying it's like two people sharing one mailbox, share the same address, but the post service makes the distinction between both, although they are coming from the same mailbox and gives its own port. Yes, it's one way to think about it. Yep. Or like if you go inside of like that conference hall that we talked about, there's different rooms you go to inside of the conference hall. Those all are different ports, different rooms. Port 80 is like the HTTP crowd. They speak web pages. They're going to tell you what a web page looks like. Port 22 is the SSH crowd. You go inside there and everything's secure and encrypted, and so forth. You go to the 25 crowd and they're just talking about emails all day. Just emailing each other the whole day. Nothing gets done. They're just emailing each other. that's happened in room 25, port 25. So now that you have a better understanding of ports being used from a port address translation perspective, the one thing that's not clear when you're learning about PAT is why is the destination port even 443 or 80 or 25? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Is the ephemeral port range is effectively do we talk about the address space size? Or per se, I think it's somewhere like actually in the voiceover of the video. But ports can range up from effectively 0 to 65535. Eric says you go to port 23 to tell your secrets. Yeah. You can't keep a secret in room port 23. Everyone knows everyone's business in port 23. Nice. So we have a limited amount of port space, which is fine because there really aren't that many ports to cover. And you're probably not going to really memorize them all. You're going to be familiar with some of the more commonly used ones as you get exposure to more and more of them. So I'm going to preface this by saying this instead. The moment your computer has to connect to another computer and exchange communication in a structured manner, a structured data format, there's likely going to be a common port for that is registered by a certain authority. And that's these folks. Great name. Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So these folks do just about everything. All those root servers, DNS side, TLDs, address space, port addresses, ports. This company is like, it's the company. They manage all that for us. And they keep all of the ISPs and nations and servers all up to snuff. Kind of give the standards that everyone needs to be able to be speaking on for the same language so nothing gets confused. So that is what you're going to see. You might actually even see IANA on certain DNS requests. The Illuminati of the internet. Yes. They are the shadow company. Shadow IT. They're those behind the curtain. Those that we cannot see. They manage all that for us so we don't even have to think about it. Okay? So like I said, to kind of preface this before we even talk about port numbers, because you will not remember them all. You're probably going to remember a good chunk of them when you study for the Net Plus and the Sec Plus when you have to be quizzed on it. And then you're going to remember a lot during that time. And then you're generally going to remember some of the common ones that you interact with. 80, 443, 25, 22, etc. And then maybe some like local web servers you're running. Some of them will be on like 8080, 9000. 9001 is my preference. you're going to have these web servers configured internally on your network that have company-defined ports. Like, or we're just going to use this port number internally for all this kind of stuff. That's probably going to be the effective limit of your bandwidth of being able to memorize ports. And a common misconception students run into when they first start studying all this stuff, and I'm sure some of you have already ran into this, is you're like, I need to memorize everything. Oh, I need to learn like every DNS record. I need to know what they all look like off the top of my head. I need to go and map the entire DNS request process. I need to memorize all the class A, B, and C network address space, the CIDR notation, the ports. I can keep going. But you can see the problem there. And I'll kind of paint it to you a different picture. How many things can you really kind of keep in your head for things that you just need to like do in your life before you start writing them down and make like, okay, I need a grocery list. I need like a to-do list. I need to kind of make a record. I'm going to read that later. As I study or read something, I'm going to write it down, or like a cooking recipe, I'm going to save the recipe. And the point is, you're then going to have a reference knowledge that you can look up as you need. And you're never going to be confused about the concept, but you're going to have the knowledge handy. And we've sort of hit that point now in networking, is that you can see how much conceptually you need to understand, to the point where unless you're like daily talking about it, daily in the know, daily referencing it, it starts to become too cumbersome to keep in your head at all times. And this is why I keep kind of focusing so much on the concept of just understand what we're doing enough that you can get through the topic of conversation, and then we're going to continue to reinforce it as we go. And then you're going to remember what you need to know most, and then reference what you need to know at the time of. And that is how you'll be the most efficient. And the port side of things is really going to make that abundantly clear. And same with HTTP. So, all well-known ports. Okay. Here you go. Go and remember all that. I dare you. Triple dog, double dog, quadruple dog dare you. Come back to me if you can. If you can memorize all these ports. I'd be thoroughly impressed. In all my years of working with IT, from when I was young, messing around with LAN parties, to working in it, I haven't met anyone who's been able to just memorize all this stuff. So I'm really trying to preface something quite important to you. Yeah, exactly. Eat you. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Yeah, exactly. What did you have for breakfast? What did you eat like last week at 2 p.m. on like Wednesday? Right? Like, what you need to understand as students is you need to be effective with your time and bandwidth and memorization. Is to be productive with it. Be productive. So yes, like as KS and Doug is saying inside chat, is like the stuff that you're most commonly oriented around is going to be what you're going to remember the most. And then there are several more like well-known ones that you really kind of got to keep in front of your head just to generally understand. And like I said, when in doubt, if there is a structured way of exchanging data from your computer to another computer, through routers, through switches, through firewalls, there is typically going to be a port and protocol for that. And all you need to do is continue to look it up as you go until you're familiar with it so that you don't have to. And then when you are working with it day to day, you'll remember it. And if you stop working with it and you change your job, you're probably just going to forget it a month later. It's kind of like what I said about subnetting. You're generally going to understand how it functions and why, to separate IP address space logically, segmentation, security, optimization, all that stuff. But in terms of remembering how to do it, well, unless you like your day-to-day job is slicing up a subnet and CIDR notation this and address space that, you're just not going to remember. So conceptually remember what we're doing. And then if you're cramming for a Security Plus and Network Plus exam, which is, I think that's my only gripe with theoretical exams, is they force you to cram. And I don't recommend that, but that is just a nature of the beast for those certifications. And that's why people call it like brain dumping. They're just going to be like, I'm just going to go brain dump. I'm just going to like, as soon as I get in the exam, I'm just going to write everything down in my head that I just stuffed in there like the hour before the exam. Yeah, there's a reason for that. And my statement to you when you hear that is, in what job in the world do you wake up in the morning, stuff your head with a bunch of knowledge, and then get to work and write it down before you forget it, and then say, okay, I got to remember through the day now looking at this sheet? Not realistic. That doesn't exist. So when you're in the field, when you start in IT and you're like a help desk analyst, and when you start moving your way into security, you're going to have things that you need to know, like your frame of reference, your immediate knowledge that you need to be familiar with, that you can study up on and be fresh, and you're sort of just like focusing on that in your day-to-day and your weeks ahead. And afterwards, when you're changing jobs and such, you can bring a new reference knowledge in. But most importantly, just as you've learned about like network addressers like NAT and PAT, and like the flow of that, the flow of DNS, the flow of private IP address and public address routing, just conceptually remember this stuff, and then you'll be fine. I really need to stress that. Yes. Bro saying, yeah, director of security feels that way sometimes. I feel ya. Yeah. Yeah, so I've been in senior management, both from like non-technical, so I used to work in hospitality, and I've worked in like executive director positions, same thing. It's just like a constant like kind of show up, and yeah, there's so much you kind of remember, then you forget about the next day, or there's like something changing, operational debriefs and such. And it's all about efficiency. Security is very similarly as you kind of move up in the ranks. Cass saying you have no clue how many times you've resolved issues on the fly, just doing research on the spot. It's changing, everything's changing so rapidly that you just need to have a grasp of fundamentally how these things work, and then you reference them as needed. Beard is saying your wife's to-do list. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we have to-do lists. We write this stuff down. That's why. So I wanted to preface with this. Now, what are some kind of like key things that I recommend for you to know? Well, first things first, that there are 65535 ports, like 65,535 ports. And there are categories. So kind of looking back, there are categories of these ports that, so this is like easier mental logic to remember in your head. We have well-known ports, we have registered ports, and we have ephemeral ports. So well-known ports are all the things that you're kind of seeing mostly inside here, like the most common stuff. And that goes up to over here, right? Let me zoom in a little bit. That kind of takes us from like 7 all the way to 1023. So kind of like right up over here, or 1025 even, I guess. And then we have 1024 to 49151. So yeah, kind of the break happens from like Microsoft RPC. And that goes all the way to 49,151, kind of up to here at the end. So well-known ports, that's the stuff that you need to kind of have a little bit more front and center of your head. And you can see them. They're a lot more common, right? We have over here. So we have SSH, Telnet. That's what Eric was saying. So Telnet room. DNS, so port 53. HTTP, port 80. Your mail ports. So kind of looking at so port 25 as SMTP. You've got POP3. Your NetBIOS report ports for basically like name authentication and authorization of the network is shared through those types of ports, and you're going to kind of learn those as you go. HTTPS, some of the more common ones that you'll be exposed to. So it's important to know that those well-known ports are not going to change. Bro saying paper to-do lists and written to-do lists, and eventually everything makes its way to digital project management, Jira, or whatever. Exactly, yeah. Like look, all this stuff that we've been like taking notes on as we go, this is for us to make like visual clarity of what we're seeing instead of just walls of text, because our brains work better that way for the most part. And then once we have our notes, we start to just translate that and put them into better formats for us to understand. That's what notes are. So we have these well-known ports that don't change. And then we have the registered ports that are more specifically assigned by the INA. And then we have those ephemeral ports. And those ephemeral ports are meant to be used and discarded. That's what they're there for. They're temporary categories. That's really it. Ephemeral ports are going to be pretty common for all of that you see happening over here, like all this stuff. And this image is using, they're using like registered ports for some of this like activity outside for reference, but you're actually going to be seeing ephemeral ports here instead. And then you can see the the well-known ports of like 443, you know that's an HTTPS request. Port 80 is a well-known port for a normal HTTP. And you're going to see those more and more and more and more. Some of the more common ones, like we said, right? 20, the range from like 20, I think that's why we have it towards the end over here. These are the ports that we recommend for you to become most familiar with first. This is a more easy to digest list of ports. So for those of you that are like, oh my god, well, like what do I just need to know? Well, from 20 to 443, and these ones more specifically are going to be the ones that are most commonly interacted with by you at first. This is going to be like the list. So port 20, 21, 22, 23, 25, 53, 67, 80, 110, and 443. Some of you will go and work in IT after, and you're going to be working inside of some type of like network configuration. You're probably going to still see some telnet connections between switches because no one wants to upgrade the switches. It's still a thing. And then some of you are going to have SSH connections to hop inside of a switch and then do some remote configuration, etc. So these are the most common ones that we recommend to just be more familiar with for now. And then you're going to be exposed to more and more as you go. But again, when in doubt, as long as there is a means or intention for your computer to speak to another computer in a structured format, there's typically going to be a registered port for that. And that registered port comes with the protocol to format that data. There you go. Does that make sense? Thumbs up. Then by extension, when we start doing the labs and you see a request coming, let's say like destination is 82.6.4.2 on port 53, what does it mean? Pop quiz, chat. Especially the newcomers. If I'm making a destination request on port 53, what does that mean? $53. Rena. Yeah, cool. Good. Nice. Good. There you go. That's all you need to know. Like, that's what you need to know. It's like, okay, cool. I saw like a request hitting this port. Cool. All right. Let me look it up. All right. It's a DNS request. And then you kind of remember it and you're good to go. Sweet. We're going to take a break there. And then we're going to come back and what are we going to do? We are going to actually inspect the ports in the command line now. So we're actually going to use some network diagnostic tools to inspect ports actively listening and established on our endpoints. And then we're going to hack the matrix. We are going to become Trinity, and we are going to learn how to do port scanning with Nmap. We're going to keep going from there. So let's take a breather. Go stretch. Go do a couple cartwheels, a couple flips, a couple push-ups. Let's go do stuff. And I will be right back. I'll throw the ad as well too, so that no one's missing anything at that time. Coffee break. Yeah, I need to go get another coffee. Prince doing push-ups, nice. Do it. All right, we're back. We are back. Hope everyone got some coffee, tea, bit of stretching. Let's hop inside of our labs now. Fire up these VMs. So we're going to be doing a little bit of back and forth over here. So let's actually fire both of them up at the same time. See, I got some water, staying hydrated. Yeah, good call. Oh, hot garbage. Thanks for the follow. Yep. Loaded. If it's your first time loading the VMs, KS, yeah, it's all good. Podcast mode, lurk away. Lurkers welcome, students studying welcome, all are welcome. So long as you are dedicated and you want to become the very best, that's all that matters. The very best of yourself. Okay, VM's loaded. So we're gonna hop on our Linux workstation first. While that's loading up. So now that we have a general sense, of how things are working, we're going to spend a lot of time doing port and protocol analysis. And then we're going to dive into network traffic analysis. And I stressed this in the beginning, but I'm going to stress it again. The reason why we're spending so much time in networking is not just because I keep saying it's critical, there's a reason why I keep saying it's critical. And the reason is that when data is moving along the network layers, you can see, now that you've learned, it is very structured. It has to be going a very structured and expected way, or things break. And this is the best chance you have to I guess, anticipate and understand where you might catch adversaries and their behavior. From a cybersecurity perspective, that is the critical reason, is because all of the different endpoints like Windows, Linux, Mac, Unix, BSD, all these different operating systems and embedded systems, they all still have to transmit data back and forth one another through a structured, formatted approach through the various network OSI layers following this TCP/IP model. They're all gonna transmit the same way. And that's our best bet at understanding and being able to anticipate adversary behavior. From an IT perspective, it's also going to be your best bet to understand where things are going wrong on the network. Because again, they have to share the same structured model. And this is a far cry from, like, Windows logs look different than Linux logs. Mac OS logs look different than both of them. There's some similarities, sure, but they're all a little different. And there's many different ways that those systems can be configured and supported for users, and that's where attackers can really hide. It's hard to find them when they're on the endpoint, but it's best and easiest to find them when they have to traverse the network. Same with IT problems. If it's not a hardware issue, your best bet is being able to understand where is the problem in the network? Where's the network issue happening? And especially more important from an IT perspective these days, because everything is a web app. Previously, a lot of software was local to the endpoint, so it was a lot of local operating system troubleshooting. But now a lot of it is web application troubleshooting. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this area for this reason. And this is now why we're going to focus on port analysis. And, and port inspecting. So, yes, not trying to not to miss the streak. Yeah, it's good. So, by the way, you really like the VM system for the lab. Super simple and effective. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Good feedback. I'll let the CoreStack team know as well. It's really, really nice platform. We agree. Karina is saying, you think in one of the data defense podcasts you call this fatal funneling? Maybe? I don't think I remember saying that. Maybe that was Greg or Talis or Rob. I don't recall saying that term myself. I could have. It's not a term that I've really used often, so maybe something I kind of just thought of on the fly if it was me. CI saying like application security? No, a little bit like application. So application security is a little bit more on the code level. So what is the code doing that is permitting network vulnerabilities to occur? That's what application security is. So it's understanding what did the software and the code do to then be reflected as a vulnerability at the network level. So you're actually kind of digging deeper before you even get to the network stack. So, and that's an entirely different discipline within inside of cybersecurity. Hot Garbage is the first Cyber Twitch you've ever watched. Cool, well, welcome. Welcome to Cyber Twitch. Yeah, this is our first time doing this too. We've been doing this for several weekends now. We're in class 10. So what is that? I guess 5 weeks? Yeah, enjoying it. And thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy it with us. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to introduce you to some tools. We're going to open up the old terminal. And the first tool we're going to be introducing you to is a tool called Netstat. We're actually going to be using this one pretty commonly, I would say. It's definitely a common tool to use. Let's go ahead and do this. So what is Netstat? Print network connections, routing tables, interface, etc. It's effectively just a utility that shows like network connections, routing tables, interface statistics, you name it. And we want to understand how to use it from a port inspection perspective. So we can put all Netstat TAC H to get an idea about the various options that we have here. And there aren't many. We can look at routes, we can look at interfaces like our Ethernet adapters and such. We can look at what's listening and so forth. So let's actually run some of these commands. And the ones that we want to be focusing on a lot more of is going to be Netstat TAC A. Slower to. Let's open that. Hawk Arbor just saying, see your coffee mug. There is a level effect mug, actually. We are in the process. We have a swag store, yeah, but I need to get it moved over. And I need to get myself a proper mug, too. These are nice, but definitely want to get a level effect mug. I just need to move it over to a new platform. So, anyway, that's that. TAC ANO. And remember always, explain shell, right? If you're ever unsure about this kind of things, I'm going to keep on referencing this. So we're looking for all numeric and who is owning like the process ID and such. So that's what the TACO is actually going to be showing us more of. I want to see like PIDs. I want to see what things are being linked to. Let's kind of go back to the top, see what the stuff actually looks like. Jeez, that's actually a lot of Netstat output. So let's go ahead and do this. Netstat, TAC, ANO, and pipe that over to less. Right from the beginning. Yeah, a hat, KS. And we need a hat, we need a hoodie, we need a mug, we need a mouse pad, and we need like sweatbands for all of the hardcore sessions we got to do here studying. So, so take a look at it soon. Get that ready. Beanie sessions. I say toque. So yes, up in Canada over here, y'all say beanies down south, but it's a toque over here in Canada. Yeah, explain shell is super cool. Level effect pajamas? I mean, why not? Why not? Onesies. Nice. Yeah. So, as we can see, kind of going to the beginning over here, we got a lot of information from Netstat. And what it's effectively doing is like basically just showing us like TCP connections, UDP, and we can see all the various connections that are like listening and outgoing from our system, which is super handy. And let's say we wanted to do something like Netstat TAC ANO find TCP, I think. Or geez, wow, I'm thinking the wrong one. Grep. If I could type. So we could do a little bit of grepping, looking for different types of TCP connections. And remember, TCPers have, those are the ones that have the three-way handshake. So SYN, SYNAC, ACK. So these are established sessions going on right now. That means that there are going to be persistent connections until we terminate them or something terminates them. So we can see that there's actually some local stuff happening on this box. 8080, 5901, 9000. Interesting, right? So Netstat, Netstat's going to be effectively like your like it's like a troubleshooting toolkit. It's a quick snapshot to figure out what ports are connected to what IP addresses are connected to what are TCP connections, what are UDP connections. It's a high level overview to figure out what it's actually showing. KS saying, sorry, miss what ANO was doing. Over here, so Netstat TAC ANO showing all numeric and timer. Actually, I should put a P over there. It should be ANOP. I want to see the PID information, and I missed the P over here. So this is related to like time network sessions and then also the PID. So my bad. 1 second. That's that. NOP. So now we're actually going to see if there's any PID activity related to these sections. Pipe that over to less. So we can see that on PID 967, we can see like Tiger VNC, which is a kind of like a remote desktop kind of connection. CI, no, again, don't get too hung up on like what you're supposed to do first. I'm talking more conceptually like functionality and features. Find, I was typing from Windows. That was like, I was in my head, I was thinking Windows for a second. But we can do like grep TCP. So Netstat, TAC, NOP, and grep TCP. So now we can see like just the TCP connections coming over here, or we can kind of grep through. Maybe we want to find what's listening on 967 or some searching for Tiger VNC. But now we can see like there's actually some things that are allowing us to connect. So 5901 port 5901. We also have something on 8080, kind of listening. These are listening services. We have SSH. So here we see port 22. Our local host is listening on 22. We're trying to anticipate, or we're saying, hey, we're open for SSH connections. You want to talk to us securely? Remember we did some SSH already? That's how this is actually functioning. So you can see what our system is hosting. And this is kind of effectively like... what this output is sort of like doing is... it's like saying we have our host right here. And I have these little like network services that are open right now. They're just waiting for connections. So I have like 22, I've got 5901, I've got 9000, got 8080, and they're just listening right now. They're listening for connections. So just imagine. Oh, let's actually open up another one. Now imagine I did netcat, tac, I don't know, NVLP, 15337. Now we have something listening on port 15337, which is over 9000, so that's great, and it's also a bit of a elite port going on. Or we could even do like 11337. To do something like this, right? Now I'm going to run Netstat and up again, and let's see if we can actually find that connection over there. Pipe that over to less. And here you go. So here you go. TCP, listening. So here's the local host. It's listening, and it's listening on port 11337. It's a TCP connection. Because remember... oh, yeah, sorry. Side. Actually, I can just take it off for now. So, again, you can see over here, like TCP... we have a TCP connection from netcat, so it's listening locally, 0000, and that's just another notation for local hosts, kind of like 127.00.1. And it's listening on port 11337. And we can see the PID it's related to is PID 46790, and it's running netcat. So we can use Netstat as an ability to inspect, again, what is listening, what is outgoing, what's established. All port-related activity, we can identify running Netstat. And you can run Netstat and also run with the TAC-P option to get the PID. And if I wanted to run like PSOX and then do a PID search for... Great, I should have actually wrote that down. What was it again? 4 something? 46790. 46790. 6790. So here we go. You can actually now do some more diagnostics and trace the connection down by the PID and see the full convention of what was actually ran on the command line. So we can actually do some debugging, troubleshooting, and some security analysis to say, hey, we have a listening connection on port 11337, and the PID was 46790, and it said it was running netcat. So I did a PSOX lookup, grepping for the PID. We can identify here that we have netcat running with some options here. So we have the specific command. So if we're looking for like indicators of compromise, something that flags like malware or malicious activity, attacker activity happening on this endpoint, well, this is something maybe we want to look out for. this is an IOC. Like, we should be looking for this type of convention as a string to match with like detection rules and firewalls and antivirus and all those tools. We want to be looking for that type of activity. Eric's saying this is how you see which ports are listening. So if you see a vulnerable port, then you can exploit that. Soon. Not so much a vulnerable port. That's where we would use something like Nmap, which we're going to get to. For now, Netstat is a tool where you can just use. It basically gives you a snapshot of your network activity and what's going on, like what's outbound, what's inbound, what IP addresses, and what ports. That's it. Thanks, Cass. Yeah, went a little fast there. IOC, indicator of compromise. Eleven Oblomov, thanks for the follow as well. Cool. So, some pretty cool stuff that we can do. Now, these commands are a little interchangeable between Windows and Linux. So Netstat, TAC, NOP is one way we can do that over here. I think that was actually more the Windows way off the top of my head now. I know, just going off on a bit of a different way. But Netstat, TAC, tulpin, one where we want to use more so on the Linux side. So let's do that together. So looking for TCP, UDP, listening sockets, and PIDs. And the same output. So depending on the flags, what you want to use. Can't say pretty cool. You can see the specific command running it. Yeah, exactly. Bearded saying crazy how I understood 90% of what you translated when doing that PSOX command. Yeah. The learnings. Things are happening. It's all kind of coming together. That's why we're like, oh, we're going to teach you this like PS stuff first, and we're going to teach you networking after, and then when you can come back to it, and you can do like kind of a trace. So kind of walking through that again, right? If we had this netcat connection open on another shell, kind of listening for activity, and we ran like a Netstat, TAC, NOP, or tulpin, this, and that actually gave us the output showing TCP connection on port 11337, PID 46790, PS aux, and then grep for that PID. So we've been able to kind of reverse the behavior just by doing some diagnostics and lookup. Pretty cool. So it really starts to come together now. Now, there's another command. Actually, we kind of mess around a little bit now, and we can do some fun netcat stuff going back and forth. So let's actually connect our Windows workstation. So we have this open netcat listener, right? Been able to determine this connection happening over here. Now let's go ahead and open up PowerShell. And we're going to do netcat, was that 10.0.2167, 11337. Hello from Windows. For that one across. Over to Linux, so we can see the connection that's been made over here. Now let's go ahead and run that again. And let's actually show all connections. So now you can actually see the foreign address. That's pretty cool. So there's a big difference now between our outputs. Now that someone connected to our netcat session, well, we can see that there's an established connection going on. Local address here, right, is now connected with the Windows IP address. And you can see it grabbed one of those ephemeral IP, so one of those ephemeral ports. That's pretty cool. And that's sort of the power of being able to do this quickly on the command line. And actually, like, a lot of GUI-based tools are just going to be running commands and queries like this under the hood, and then just giving you like a nice dashboard view of what's happening, truthfully. So now we can actually see more of what's happening at a network layer level. This isn't just a network connection anymore. We actually have an established foreign address connected to us. And you can see the difference, right? Established. Let me go back up in the... This was like the first one we ran. So netcat as a listener was just a listening port at this point in time, but we had no established connections. And then after the netcat connection was established, it actually shows up here. So you could be maybe running some filters. And there's another tool we can use that some people find a little bit easier, but it's called SS. So this is called socket statistics. And it's sort of like the more improved version of Netstat, but honestly, it's good enough. Like, they're both equally good in their own ways, I would say. But this one, you can actually do a little bit more specific commands, so you don't have to rely on grep as much. So a socket statistics command, you could actually specify the state and say, like, I just want established connections. And you can see there's no grep activity happening over here, as opposed to Netstat. Full-blown list of flags. And then I would still have to go ahead and do like a grep tac I, case insensitive, for established connections. So you can see the difference in the command length that you have to do. One actually requires some command redirection and some grepping action. One is just a specific command that you can then chop up these columns for what you need. Pretty cool. Does that make sense? Cool. Sounds good from Eric's side. Nice. So pretty straightforward, right? So CI, yeah. SS and Netstat are just two different tools you can use for port and IP address diagnostics from your endpoint. That's all. Just different utilities. And I just wanted to sort of demonstrate a difference in some of the naming convention and command convention, depending on your preference. And if one is not providing you the output you need, well, try another tool. Put it in your tool belt. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Go ahead and kill these connections over here. Nice. All right. So let's jump over now to network scanning with Nmap. Here we go. Nmap. Nmap. Somewhat. So you took a look. So Bearded saying, so you took a look at what ports are listening, ready to receive a connection from the outside world. You then made and established a connection from another host, and it logged information. Netstat, correct. You are correct, Bearded. Yes. So Netstat by default, if I just did like Netstat tech Tulpin or a Tulpin, kind of just as many connections as I can. This is a snapshot to show me all of the current TCP and UDP connections on this box. Yeah, cool. And the only thing that changed afterwards was when I actually connected. So let's open up the listener again. Port 11337. Run Netstat once more. You now see we have this listening connection over here. And when I go back and I connect from Windows to that connection, run Netstat once more, we now have an established connection that appeared. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, this one right here. And now it's running on a new PID, 88940. So if I did a little psox grep 88940, we can now get the full command and command flags that were being used. Pinac, Nmap the GOAT. Yeah, Nmap's awesome. Nmap is amazing. Amazing. Nmap and NCAT and Netcat. Nmap and Netcat are kind of like those two tools alone. You can effectively do whatever you need to do on a network, like just with those two tools alone. You can make requests. You can do scanning. Like it's crazy. So let's jump into it and have some fun. First things first. Nmap, the network mapper. And this is free. This is absolutely free. Old school website for those of us that grew up 80s and 90s. You might remember some old school looking web pages. Nmap hasn't changed. It looks like exactly the same. Like almost like identical. Nmap's a pretty cool tool. It is, at its heart, it is a network scanning tool. Hence the name Network Mapper. You can identify open ports, running services, potential vulnerabilities, you name it. Like, it's so crazy what you can do. You just with Nmap alone, you can provide a vulnerability assessment to a client. You could actually do that. You could charge for that service. If you knew what you were doing and you ran Nmap on their network and you're able to interpret the results and perform like your own security assessment and engagement, just Nmap alone could be enough to be able to do that and charge thousands of dollars for with a free tool. And I am not kidding. It is that powerful. It is so powerful. That Trinity in the Matrix also used Nmap. Yes. Okay. You can see this right here. Nmap run completed. 1 IP address scanned. I love this. SSH nuke. At this remote IP address, root password. Sent, connecting to the root IP via SSH, successful, attempting to exploit such and such vulnerability, SSH version 1, CRC32, successful, resetting root password to Z10N0101, system open access level 9, SSH in. So like, you know, like they're kind of having some good fun with that. Good old Nmap. They were legit using Nmap to hack into the Matrix. Yeah. Finac, yeah, Metasploit. Yeah, we're gonna. That's much later. That's much more advanced. But yeah, we have exploitation frameworks, kind of like Nmap, that we could use. Nmap, I wouldn't really consider like a framework, but I'd probably put it the same tier of like an all-in-one type of tool to be able to do a lot of things to a targeted objective, which Metasploit is kind of the same way. But let's jump into it. So at its heart, we can run Nmap to be able to perform a network scan of a target IP. So let's span one of these windows. Actually, no, I'm just going to leave this one open. And what I want is my Windows IP address. Okay. So the most basic network scan you can run would be something like Nmap target IP. So let's just go ahead and run that. And when it starts, you're going to see a little starting Nmap version 7.8. Here's the website, and at this date and time. And notice it says the host seems down. If it is really up but blocking our ping probes, try TAC PN. So I'll pause there. Chat, what do you think's happening? I know my Windows is up. Yeah. That's right, EDU. ICMP. ICMP is being blocked. It's not responding. So what does that tell you about Nmap? Check out Mr. Robot, yeah. So Nmap by default starts off by performing what's called a ping probe or a ping sweep. And that's actually pretty common with vulnerability scanners and network scanners. They're just going to do a ping request because it's, remember what I said? It's really lightweight. Echo request, echo reply. It's just like a simple protocol exchange. So by default, 3.5 seconds, it tried it, nothing happened, it timed out. Good to go. But it's telling us if we wanted to be able to perform the scan, we can just assume, we're going to tell Nmap now by using the TAC PN option. And again, good old explain shell. Ever sure. Nmap TAC PN. Oops. We're not going to perform DNS resolution. You see, DNS creeping back up again. So instead of using ICMP, which is going to rely on a DNS request, we're going to tell it to ignore that. And we're just going to run the command as is. And we're telling Nmap, hey, the host is actually up. Just run your scan on those ports that you want to scan. And what Nmap is actually scanning by default is its most common 1000 ports, which is not the same as the top well-known ports. So there's a lot of ways you can find that information, but what Nmap's actually scanning for are their most commonly used ones based on their analysis of what they've seen inside of networks. So it's actually a much different list. And they're actually scanning even ephemeral ports. So just keep that in mind as you go. It's not actually scanning, it's not a one-to-one mapping of like the known ports and registered ports. Nmap has its own preference. Just like if you use Nessus or other vulnerability scanners, they have their own preference of what they're scanning. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run the scan again against the Windows target. And I can hit enter as this is happening to get a timer of what's actually happening like under the hood. So it's undergoing host discovery. And now it's completed that. And now it's actually doing the scan. And then the scan, once it got through the host discovery and ignored it, it just went and did the scan itself. So it took 17.68 seconds. And let's take a look and see what the output looks like. Nmap scan report for this IP address. Host is up. Very low latency, so very, very fast response time. It's not showing 994 filtered ports, and a filtered port is just saying that it can't determine whether the port is open or closed. And that could happen for a number of reasons. Firewall rules, latency, things timing out, unclear response requests. There's a number of things that could happen. But that's what that means. it's saying, okay, well, the other, because look, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of the common 1,000 ports to scan for, it's been able to detect as open. So what Nmap has done is it did like an SSH request to the Windows host, and then it dropped the connection, said, okay, cool. All right, Windows is responding. That means it must be open. Let's do like a remote procedure call, MSRP. Let's do a NetBIOS request. You name it. So all what Nmap is doing at this point in time is it's just sending like the client server model request that we talked about. The client is making a request to that server with that port with the expected type of language. And we've seen some of that language like with HTTP, where we did like a netcat, get, etc. Like at HTTP here, HTTP get request. You can find a better example. So we did something like this on the command line before. So we did like get, root path, HTTP protocol 1, host, put in the host name, accepting language, etc. Nmap is doing that kind of language request, but for all the other protocols in their own formatted ways. That's what it's doing under the hood. And if it gets a positive response from the server, which is just this client server model happening again, then it's going to tell us that the port is up. And going back to the iPad connection, that is effectively so we have our host, Nmap, common ports, target, and if that target here is hosting those connections like this, it's going to get a confirmation, a positive response. So if this is yes, that's yes, and this is no, then these will go back to the host and say, yes, those ports are open. And that's all what we've seen inside of this Nmap scan. This side. These ports responded as open, and some of them were unclear. It doesn't mean that those ports are not actually open, but these ones are. So with a quick scan of Nmap, we've been able to determine available ports that are open for connection. So what if I did like ncat E9001? Let's do that again. See if it's actually in the common ports. I'm not totally sure if it is, but let's see if it actually picks it up. Okay, so no, it wasn't actually inside of the port range. So let's move actually on. We're gonna do TAC PN, and we're actually gonna do a more focused scan. And let's do TAC P. So from port 1 to 10,000. Okay, so that's the syntax now. If we want to scan a port range with more specificity. Let's run that again. Yeah, I'm getting there, Steven. We're going to do a full port scan in a moment. TAC PTAC. Lead Hacksaw. Lead Hacksaw scanning. Take a little bit longer now this time. So last time we did 18 seconds. Oh, it actually still didn't scan it. Interesting. Gonna have to do a deeper scan. Pretty surprised that it didn't pick up on that. It's, you know what? It's probably because I can't really understand the protocol unless I go a little bit deeper. Okay, I'll leave that up and we're going to come back to it. Let's do Nmap TAC 9001. And let's actually... There's some more additional flags. Like we can keep building Nmap to do specific things. We're still not finding actually port 9001. So maybe what I want to do now is I can use a attack T operator or flag. Nmap attack T. And you can see that Nmap actually has modes of scanning. So like paranoid, sneaky, polite, normal, aggressive, and insane. So let's take a look, right? The first two are for IDS evasion. So you can actually use Nmap in like a stealth mode. Polite mode slows down the scan to use less bandwidth and target machine resources. Normal mode is default. So when we don't have the TAC 3 option, it's just by default normal. And then aggressive mode speeds scans up by making the assumption that you are on a reasonably fast and reliable network. Excuse me. Finally, insane mode assumes that your externally fast network are willing to sacrifice some accuracy for the speed. So there's some different types of options. So for like example, TAC 4 prohibits the dynamic scan delay from 10 milliseconds. So maybe like something is not, it's just like timing out. So that's one thing that we can do over there. And we can effectively just like fine tune this Nmap scan to be able to get what we need it to do. Does that kind of make sense so far what it is? I guess I kind of like just keep going then. Does anyone have any questions so far, like in the initial scans, before I start adding some additional things and making it a little bit more complex? Is anyone unclear, like when I talk about what Nmap is and when I look at the scan results? Yeah? Okay. So quick review. Alright, so what we've done, Nmap is it's a network mapping scanning tool. It also, it's looking for open ports, and it's looking for service information on what those ports are. And it does this by initiating client requests to this target, which it's treating like a server. So if I had a web server running on my Windows system, I could run something like Nmap TAC P on port 80 against the Windows IP. and I want to scan just for HTTP types of connectivity happening between, or sorry, HTTP ports and protocols running on that target Windows IP address. And that would be very similar to just performing like a regular HTTP GET request to a web server. Very, very similar. And Nmap is just waiting for a confirmation from the server to say, hey, yes, I got your request. And if it did, then it's going to tell us that that port is open. So by default, if I don't specify anything, and I just run a targeted scan like this, Nmap is going to fail because it's trying to perform a ping sweep. It's sending an ICMP request, which is being blocked somewhere on the network. And then it tells us to run like a TAC-PN, which tells us to disable ping sweeps, which is just actually trying to disable DNS resolution of that IP address. And we're just telling Nmap it is up. And then Nmap is going to run its scan, and it's going to hit 1,000 common ports that it configures to be commonly configured. Some of those ports will be like HTTP, performing like this like GET request. And if the server, if the target IP address is offering any of those connections in a listening state, then it's actually going to confirm that the service is available, and Nmap will tell us in this output, that port is open, and this is the likely service available to it. But it's telling us that there's also a number of ports that it cannot confirm a connection on because it didn't receive a response. And it didn't receive a response in the format that it was expecting. Does that make it a little bit more clear what Nmap is doing? Cool. Yeah, Crenus is good. Joe's good. Cool. All right. Yeah, for sure. Nothing like a good quick review. It's using most of the layers, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is an application layer down. We're here on the terminal at the application layer. And there's no encryption. So that's not a big deal. Now, some session information. Yeah, but by default, so if there is a TCP connection going on, then yes, it would be. It would be using that layer as well. But effectively, 7 down to 3. Now, layer 2 is also involved, but that's not because of that's not because of Nmap itself. Layers 2 and 3 are effectively just to move connections around the network. That's it. So it's a byproduct. If I were to use Netcat or Nmap or curl or wget, it doesn't matter. They're all going to use layers 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't matter. Now, if you had encrypted Netcat, or sorry, Nmap, then maybe we would use like the presentation layer. If we had Nmap as a persistent connection that didn't terminate, then we would be using layer 5 as well too to establish a session. And remember, layer 5 being like the TCP, SYN, SYNAC, ACK, like the three-way handshake, kind of like establishing that. So it uses what it needs to use from the OSI model, but so does everything else in that regard. It's not specific to Nmap. Does that help a little bit more, Bearded? Yeah, cool. So, cool. So on that note, That's a good question to ask, because why can't we see this listener? Like, I ran this, right? And then I did TAC-B. I'm trying to specify, like, port 9001. Didn't that, like, not find it earlier? Hold on a second here. What's going on? Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, because I didn't actually specify. Yeah, sorry, my mistake. So earlier I did a scan of all ports from ports 1 to 10,000, and it actually didn't find the netcat listener. Now, when I specified it, found it. So what does that tell you about Nmap's reliability? What does that tell you about vulnerability and network scanners reliability? That's right. It is not foolproof. Now, later on when we get to cybersecurity, we're going to talk about vulnerability management, and this actually is a sneak peek of why vulnerability scanners just being ran do not count as a vulnerability assessment. And this is why you still have to go in and validate your findings if you're a pen tester or you're an analyst, etc. You still have to validate it. That is why. Now, there's a couple of different flags that we could run over here to really try to push this over the envelope. See if this is going to actually work. We could force a TCP connection. I think it's TAC-ST. Yeah, it's been a little bit. Yeah, so we're going to actually do a TCP connect scan. Let's see if that improves our results. So I'm going to force TCP connections to happen here. Karina's saying maybe good to use multiple tools. Exactly. Yes. That is why you hear me on the streams telling you, I'm like, don't get hung up on this. Don't get hung up on that. Don't just think like this is the step you're going to use every single time. It's going to be very dynamic, and you just need to rely on conceptually what you're trying to achieve and use the supporting tools and knowledge and reference lookups to achieve that objective. So the objective here is me. I am trying to determine if port 9001 is actually up. That is my objective. And you can see, like, it's still not actually finding it. Interesting. So now what I could do, we can keep going, right? We could add TAC-V for more verbosity. Do that. We could also force SYN scans to happen too. And you're going to see, like, the scan is... Oh yeah, hold 1 second. Thought it was rude. Some of these requests actually require us to be in elevated permissions. Oh, yeah, hold on. Let's try that. So now you can actually see, like, I threw the TAC-V on there, and you can actually see what it's doing. DT saying have to use the best tools for the situation. Yeah. So now you can actually see what it's doing. It's discovered an open port. So it still actually hasn't been able to determine that Netcat's actually listening over here on this Windows host. That's, see, like I mean, like that's interesting. How to use best tools for situations. So I show him. Yeah. Sweet. So running a script that starts Nmap for every single port could be an improvement. I guess like you could, yeah. So what you could do is you could make like a fully aggressive type of Nmap scan. You could like keep on adding full flags, but the scan is just going to get longer and longer. So I could like throw on all ports. I can make it verbose. I could also put like all. So this is actually going to get like operating system versions, etc. Like you could really keep on pushing everything on what Nmap can do. I could make it like attack T. I can go like super fast as well too. So we can see some of this. Now, typically, like if you're doing like an engagement, you're actually going to be running like multiple scans from multiple tools. You're going to run some Nmap, some Nessus, some web application scanners. You're going to run a bunch. And then, yeah, how I'm saying it depends if you don't care. Yeah, all what we're showing right now is like this is non-stealth. We're not trying to be an adversary now. We're just showing you effectively like what an adversary would do. But an adversary would care more about stealth, and they would hide this stuff. They would encrypt it, they would encode it, they would hide it between requests, they would do it at like timed intervals. But they still have to make the request. And that's why I said earlier too about like the networking side. They still have to actually try to make like a TCP request or something. And if you're scanning and looking for those things, then you'll be able to detect when your network is under attack. So now we've got some delays, so it's actually dropping connections. So yeah, like to Kim's comment, so running a script that starts Nmap for every single port, exactly. Like to go back on it, if you were an attacker and you were on a network, you might be trying to send like individual port requests at different times in different ways, trying to hide some of this stuff on some of the more like common ports. You can see like it's really starting to take its time. Now that we're saying like scan every single port, go crazy, get as much information as you can. So when this is done, I might actually just cut it off. See if it's going to take too long, because I want to show like the vulnerability scanning side. Will you get door knocks for scanning remote hosts? Yes. Yes, you will. There's no consent. The key to all this is consent. Yeah. You have the permission, don't do it. You can do this locally, like on your network. This is why we tell you to build a home lab and stuff to learn this stuff, and then use courses like this to train your skills. But don't just go and do this online. Now, DNS records, you can go crazy. So like, you could use tools like Domain Dossier, MX Toolbox, and stuff. So I could go to like example.com. Full DNS records, and like a general service scan. Go ahead and do this. This is all fine. It's totally fine. So you can use records like this. Not a big deal. Like, this is what people do all the time. This is how, like, Google knows how to give you results. This is how, like Shodan, if you come across, like, Shodan. It's just a crawler, goes around the internet and just kind of runs these scans all the time. You could lightly scan this. You could, like, lightly scan public related information, but that's it. Hawk Arbor just saying, like, look at this really cool loud knocking. It's yeah. So like an attacker might just like spam a massive attack happening somewhere and then kind of slip in through the side. So that's gonna take a while. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cut off the scan. The point that I'm trying to get across here is that you can configure Nmap to do as much as you need it to do. It will be quite reliable, but it's not fully reliable. That's the other point I'm trying to get across. But I do want to show you how to use Nmap now for like vulnerability assessments and whatnot. So we could use what's called Nmap scripts. So like Nmap scripting engine. So Nmap has like a ton of different scripts that you can run to enhance the ability of the scanner. Now, these all have the file extension of like .nse. So we could actually do like a locate star.nse on our disk, and you can see they're all over here at user, share, Nmap scripts. There's a ton. So if I wanted to go and do like a scan of like SMB related scripts, I could do like a locate star.nse. Oh, sorry. greptaci SMB. And these are all the scripts that are available for Nmap to be able to scan. And you can actually see it has like vulnerability scanners built in. So like, let's take a look at this. Let's pop inside of Vim. See what this actually looks like. You can see it has categories like vuln, safe. So this is a vulnerability scan. And here's all the code. Like here's the actual code that it's running. So if you actually want to see how like a vulnerability scan works, you can pull up Nmap scripts, and this is much more advanced. But you can see like these are like raw bytes and packets that Nmap is forming and then sending off to a server. But you can see under the hood exactly how it's working and why it's working the way that it is. Now let's say that I wanted to run like a vulnerability scan on a host. Well, for that, we can go ahead and we can actually just specify. You can say like Nmap let's go scan like all ports, verbose. Just go like 4, make it aggressive. Tac script, vuln. Loaded 105 scripts. So that's pretty cool. Eric's saying passive versus active. Yeah. So passive reconnaissance. Passive is just like sending normal public. Anyone can send us like a GET request. that's normal and public and accessible and permissible. Like that's the rules. So I recommend go and look up like the CFFA, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, US. This is sort of like your Bible. For those of you that are more interested in this side of things, make sure you are very, very familiar with like the CFAA, and that should kind of dictate and guide you what you can and should not do. Couple links. Yes, check your local laws as well. Thank you to you. At the end of the day, just like make sure you have consent. For all intents and purposes, you can send normal requests to any server you want. Like I could go to like google.com, right? Like this is a normal request. I could do that. I'm not going to get in trouble for that. Normal requests that you would do on the browser are a safe bet. Anything beyond that is going to get a little gray, and it's just recommended that you just don't do it. So Karina's asking what language are NSC scripts written in. I think they're written in Lua. Nmap scripting engine language. Lua. Yeah, Lua. Lua programming. A couple more minutes remaining on that. You know what? Just for like the sake of things, I want to bore everyone in stream. Let's just do the normal default instead of going through every single port. Speed that up a little bit for y'all. What's the difference between a hacker and an ethical hacker? An ethical hacker is paid and given consent by a company to be able to perform a penetration test like this, like or rather a vulnerability assessment with a defined scope agreed upon by both parties. The hacker doesn't care about that. Stephen Aber, will you be covering how to scan Wi-Fi? No, just we don't have Wi-Fi connections. It's not available. This is all just through like Ethernet-based connections. I can maybe try to get you some resources to look into, but Wi-Fi is going to be out of scope. I think we're done. Almost. 99.82% done. Cool. Cool. All right. Let's take a look at this. So now this actually... Script execution failed. That's so angry. Wonder if there's something actually inside there blocking it on the core stack side. I don't remember that there was. Let's just, for all intents and purposes, let's just run like the basic ball and scan. Interesting. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, throw in TAC PN as well, so that it doesn't get... And you know what I'll do is also TAC P. Let's just do port 22. Just for intents and purposes. I just want to make sure it's actually working. Eric, what's the longest Nmap scan that you've done? Jeez, I don't know. I've ran Nmap scans that have taken like 10-20 minutes like to complete. You can go low and slow. Yeah, worked in the course video, Karina. I don't know what's going on. CI, I'm trying something off script. No, this is all normal. Script execution. actually... Yeah. Attack P22. Yeah. Alright, well, I guess for all intents and purposes, I'll just run both scripts together. Vault, Vuln. Yeah, maybe. Maybe there's an AV on it. I don't know. Maybe something to check out on the core stack side. Last I checked, this should be fine. I'll run a debug as well too after, and then I'll kind of hit them up. Or stack team, see what's going on. Yeah, okay, so let's do a debug, just out of curiosity. Load scripts for scanning, pre-scanning, starting broadcast. Let's find out. Let's find out what's happening. Initiating NAT scripting engine, completed. That was really fast. Using DNS server, local DNS. What? Now it worked? You know why it worked? Because I'm watching it. Because I threw a debug and I was like, I'm going to watch what you're doing. And now it's actually working. Like, come on. Get out of here, Nmap. I changed nothing. All I did was throw a debug on it. It's the same command. And it didn't work before that. Wow. That is so ridiculous. What the hell? It's the same command. All I just ran was a debug. It knew it was being watched. That's right. It's yeah, Doug. Just trial and error. You're gonna run into this kind of stuff, and you just gotta follow along, find out what it's doing. So, anyways, this is a little bit more normal. So it ran a scan on it. I didn't get an error this time, and it looks like it didn't find any vulnerabilities. Something seems kind of strange though. Still. Here you go. Clam AV exec threw an error against incorrect port range specification. Well, I'm going to check with the core stack team and find out what's going on with the network. Yeah, Bearded. Interesting how the first error tells you just to run to TAC T. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting stuff, huh? Okay, so for all intents and purposes, I'll just use the course reference for now. Let's go back to the video because it kind of walks you through it. What I wanted to be able to show you was like a proper Nmap scan output. And then I'll find out what's going on later once I speak to the core stack team on the VMs. But what you should be seeing is effectively, like here at the top left. So you should be able to see some type of like scan result. And in this case, it's showing us like at least in this range, like port 631 is potentially vulnerable to like a slow LoRa's check. And here's the CVE. 2007-6750, which we could look up as like a publicly disclosed vulnerability. So that's what we should have been seeing. I'm going to run this just one more time, and we'll take a break after that. And then I'm going to run a debug as well. Like, look at that. Okay, so now it's actually like working properly after I took off the debug, but there's still a couple of failures going on as well. So yeah, maybe it is the Clam AV EDU. Gonna go find out. What is this thing? I wonder if it's at like the DNS level. think it might be. Okay, so some things were able to be accessible. This is kind of the output that you would be able to see, like security mode. Message signing enabled but not required. So that would be like a typical output of an Nmap vulnerability scan. And more specifically, like if you look in this video on the course, is you would see things like an actual vulnerability output. Bob Trufant, neat. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Just joined the stream. Is SOC 100 course listed on levelfact.com? Yes, it is. Yes, SOC 100. You can join up with us. Yeah. Interesting. So I'll touch base the course stack, but effectively what I'm trying to get across, as you can see, like with Nmap, outside of the scans doing their weird thing, is you have the ability to fully enumerate a host, like completely. And, or I shouldn't use that language yet. We'll get there. You have the ability to fully map a host's open ports, their services, and their versions. And then Nmap also comes bundled in with scripts that are coded and programmed by the Nmap development team to test and validate vulnerabilities, like known vulnerabilities. In this case, we can see some of those scripts over there. When I ran that locate command, greptac ISMB, some of them are actually scanning for these vulnerabilities. Like in this case, MS17010. You can see this is actually like the Eternal Blue exploit over here. So that's actually what it's scanning for on one of those scripts. So Nmap is like in a pinch, it has the ability to be able to run these types of scans for us. And Bob, thanks for the follow as well too, and Tata's Game and Suburban Tech. Kind of missed a couple of you, and X-Medi as well too, sorry. But thank you for the follows. Missed a couple of things there in the chat on the internals. Cool, cool. So Beard is saying, great, now you're ready for six-figure job? Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, we got a long way to go. We're only on class 10. If class 10 can get you a six-figure job, I'll be very happy for you. Cool. All right, let's take a little bit of a break over here. And we'll continue on after that. So what's up after this? Oh, I think we're actually going to open up Wireshark. Yeah. I think it's Wireshark time. Nice. Ooh, yeah. Wireshark time. I'm going to skip this version as well, too. Note to students. Don't download new versions unless you're sure about it. You can skip them in the meantime. Eric's saying all you need is a sec plus. Yeah, I know, right? There was a time if you just had a security plus and some general knowledge, jobs were being handed out up until like 2022, a little bit into 2023. And it came to a pretty steady halt after that. It's much more on the rare side. It's an exception now, which is okay. I've talked about that on other streams, that I think, you know, in some ways it might have been beneficial for students to jump right away, but I think it also painted a very unrealistic expectation of what the jobs were, and imposter syndrome was running amok. Same with burnout, with a lot of people kind of like just like faking it till they made it on the job, and then a lot of them like making even videos afterwards, like how I would have learned cybersecurity afterwards. No one wanted to really believe that cybersecurity is not entry level. We've been advocating that since 2020 when we started this. And, you know, like I spoke with students directly that were looking into our training, telling them kind of like the realities of what it's like And sure, like students didn't go with us and they went to go take live training programs from other training providers. And then they got to the interview and they couldn't explain how DNS worked, or they couldn't explain how a vulnerability could occur. And like they couldn't explain the basics and they didn't get the job. And then we had those same students coming back. And I made a post about that on LinkedIn because it's a little upsetting. It bothers me. But a lot of those students eventually came back to us after spending like $12,000 to $14,000. So, you know, like Eric, kind of going back to your point, maybe once upon a time it was like that, but I personally don't believe that it should have ever been like that. I think it should have, the expectation should have been a little bit slowed down, and companies should have been a little bit more cognizant and not overhired students that weren't ready for the positions. Cybersecurity is not an entry-level job, as you can see, like where we're starting with. It's cybersecurity is a subset of IT. So EDU, you recently passed a level 1 cybersecurity certificate by doing this one too. Yeah, get a good wide base of knowledge, learn it all. But I'll save the rants for another day. Always got a lot of opinions. So, most importantly, take your time with the stuff. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And your basics and foundations really need to be nailed down. Let's take a bit of a break over here. Gonna come back to like 7 to 10 minutes. We're gonna move over to Wireshark. So we're gonna be moving over to Lab Wireshark overview and PCAPs. And I think we've got time today to do like the ARP analysis and a 3-way handshake. Might be good. Be able to do that. Wrap up the rest tomorrow. Bearded, you need a rant moment? Yeah. Yeah. Feel ya. And yes, maybe more exciting than a Tyson fight. Still kind of sour about that. Stayed up late for nothing. Okay. I'll see y'all in like 10 minutes or so. And as normal, run the break here, the ad breaks, so that I don't have to spam you on stream as well. So the ad breaks happen when we're not actually teaching you. All right. Back. We are back. Okay. Cool. Back in action. SOC 100. Here we go. Karina, so wait, you saw Jake versus Tyson ad? Yeah, either they're listening in, or it's just because it was such a big deal. I mean, it was on Netflix. That's the only reason why I watched it, because like I have Netflix. That's hilarious. I mean, I don't like pay and watch boxing matches and stuff, but it just happened to be on Netflix, so I was like, cool, I'll actually check it out. Otherwise, I was gonna watch a recap. But yeah, so you saw the ad for it. I guess I'll put in a spoiler. It wasn't that great. Cool. Jake looks mean. Yeah. Alrighty. Do this. Let's open up Wireshark. So let's go inside of our Windows workstation. That's where we're going to do a lot of our Wireshark work on. Wireshark work. So what is Wireshark? You might have heard of it before. Wireshark it's a network protocol analyzer. That's it. It is a tool to analyze protocols. Hence a network protocol analyzer. And what it does is it provides us a visual representation of what is happening across the network. It can do real-time monitoring, or it can do analysis of captured network traffic. And you might have heard of that term before. A capture of network traffic is called a PCAP, which we'll look at soon. But that's effectively what Wireshark is. It takes all of that stuff we've been seeing on the command line and all the stuff we've been talking about conceptually with process models and flowcharts, and it maps all of that into a visual interface for us to navigate and analyze. See, I froze. Am I frozen for anyone else? Just like a network connection? Okay, so maybe just something local to CI. Maybe CI take a look at your network connection after this. So let's dive in. Here's the interface for Wireshark. I guess I should probably close all these tabs just in case. My goodness. So here is the initial page when you open up Wireshark, and you can see right away that it provides us some options to capture network traffic. If we don't have a capture of network traffic already, like as in a file as in a PCAP, then we have to capture it on one of our interfaces. And here we can see our Ethernet 3 interface. We can see our local address. So this is a loopback type of filter. So this is, so not a loopback filter, but a loopback interface. And this allows us to send traffic to ourself only and not actually being routed through our local area network. And you can see that this little kind of histogram of activity happening here. There's a little chart of little spikes of network traffic. And if I were to go, I'm actually going to close my PowerShell connection. If I were to go open up like Internet Explorer, let that load for a moment, you're going to see that thing go crazy. Go to Google. go to Google. Now let's go back to this. We can see a big spike in traffic that's actually happening right now. So let's actually go in and capture some of that in a moment, but I kind of want to walk through this top area a little bit, and don't feel like you need to memorize all of it. Just get a general sense, like a lay of the land. So a normal context menu at the top, different types of options that you can work with. Probably the most important one would be like the statistics, which we'll look at, but this actually is Wireshark's interpretation of the network traffic, and it actually provides you analytics, which is super cool. It'll provide you an analytics of DNS activity, HTTP, TCP and UDP streams, IPv4 statistics, you name it. It's also going to tell you like who's talking to who. Super, super powerful. Super powerful. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to Ethernet 3. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to hit this little blue kind of shark button over here at the menu underneath it. And this is the toolbar. So this is the toolbar to perform like various things inside of our network traffic. We'll get to that. And then we have this filter bar where we can filter out activity for what we need. So let's go and capture some of this. I'm going to select Ethernet 3. I'm going to hit the little blue shark button. And notice like right away, a ton of activity is happening on the network. I am going to go to Edge. Let's go to example.com. Cool. So a whole bunch of activity happening over there. Then I'm going to hit the little red square to stop all this activity. Now, let's take a look at this area over here. Here we have what's called the packet list pane. And these are different panes. Like imagine them like little panes of glass. So here's like our packet list. This is every single packet that Wireshark has been able to interpret from the stream of network traffic. Now, I keep saying interpret for kind of a key reason. Wireshark is not a one-to-one mapping of what's actually happening. It is an interpretation. It is its best guess, and it's very accurate. But as you can kind of see already with Nmap, it doesn't mean that it's foolproof. It just means that for the most part, you could say with a high degree of certainty and confidence that what you're seeing is actually what's happening on the wire. If you wanted to have a full, proper capture of what's actually happening, you would have more advanced tools where you could capture the network traffic as it happens, and it mirrors, like on the router, on the switch, it's mirroring the traffic one-to-one, and then recording that at a raw level. And then you would use even more advanced tools that could scan the activity of the binary to text representation. We are not going to get into that. That's a much deeper level. That's like network engineering. That's much more advanced. For what we need to know, we could safely rely on Wireshark from an IT and cybersecurity perspective as it is right now for what we're trying to accomplish. But I really want to stress that point to understand that if I make an HTTP request on port 80, Wireshark will know that I did that, and it'll tell you that I did it. But if I made an HTTP request on some random port and I changed how the HTTP headers look like and I misshaped it, Wireshark may not actually represent that as an HTTP request. Things like that. So don't rely on it as being like this super foolproof tool. It is very accurate, like that 99% accuracy, again, kind of like Nmap, but it's not foolproof. So we were able to record a bunch of traffic. We saw some things happen over here. Now, this packet list, if I scroll through it here at the top, this is literally everything that's happening on this interface right now at this point in time. And these columns over here are super cool. Like you can see everything that we just talked about. So now we can kind of start moving away from all those charts and models. Whoops. I'm going to select number so you can see like a timed chronological view of everything. But you can see the time that all of this activity was captured. You can see the source IP. You can see the destination IP. You can see the protocol being used, the length, so like the size. And you can see some general information of what it is. And now Wireshark's pretty cool because I could go down to this bottom left pane, and this is called the packet details pane. And I can actually break down each layer of the OSI model. How cool is that? So I could open up from the frame, encapsulation type, Ethernet. So I can see like the Ethernet breakdown of what's happening here based on the binary stream. I can see the interface that it was used on, the protocol. So we're in an Ethernet protocol, frame length. You can see the size of this individual packet. So it captured 528 bits, so 528 zeros and ones, which is a total of 66 bytes was the length, right? 66 length, 66 bytes, so that's a size. We can then move and take a deeper look inside of the Ethernet layer over here. And this is where we start looking at things, right? We're at that IP layer. Sorry, IP is one more layer down. But you can see over here we have layer 2. So we're looking at the MAC address. So here's the destination and the source. So the source MAC address, the destination MAC address. And it actually does some interpretation for us. It'll tell us if this was like a Samsung device or Apple, etc. So now we can see like the layer 2 activity. And it's just like how I was drawing on the charts for you on those little diagrams. Source MAC address, destination MAC address. Now I can go to the IP protocol version 4 layer. So now we're dealing with IP addresses. So we get even more information over here. Source IP, destination IP, protocol, TCP. So all that stuff that we were ever talking about, we can now get a visualized view of this. And then we can open up the TCP header. And the TCP header, right, this is where we slap on the ports. And we can see like source port, destination port. Now take a look at this. I can actually like right click this. And I can say, I'm going to right click source port and go to apply as a column. And now I have a source port column, and I can actually bring that here to just make this even easier to read. And then I can say destination port. Let's apply that as another column. Now we can actually get like a nice, good, deep view. Chronologically, like source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port. I can see the different flags that we talked about. The TCP flags. Is this a SYN flag? Is it a FIN? It's got everything you need. Like everything you need here, right? So we would do like a SYN, ACK. So that would look like the 0 bit was flagged here for the SYN. And then ACK would be 1 over here. So it would be like 10001. FIN would be the final connection. Super cool. Now, on the bottom right, we actually have the raw packet bytes. So like the bytes that were captured. So if I went to like the source port, this is actually the representation of kind of what it looks like. These values represent those things. So as I move my mouse around, so 0D, 3D is equal to this source port address over here, 59384 of destination port of E9BA. This is like the raw packet bytes. And this is in hexadecimal. Now I could go up to this filter bar and let's see if there was like actually any HTTP requests. Well, here they were. I can search now for HTTP. And was there any DNS requests? Maybe I can search for DNS. And now you can see our local IP address, like 10.0.19.153, destination to this IP address, protocol DNS. It's trying to go in and get the A record for example.com. And then you can see our DNS server responded back to us, and it gave us our A record. How cool, right? This is what I've been waiting for. Like, we have to build all that knowledge. Now we can actually hop and look at this with a tool like Wireshark for visual analysis. And you can see, right, like here's like the packet, it's the packet bytes. You can see example.com floating in the network traffic. And I could make this even more interesting. I could start using more advanced filters over here. I could do like IP.address, and it has a very unique syntax. So I would go to like Wireshark filters. Let's take a look at that. Here's some example display filters, but I want the full list. Oh yeah, here we go. So IP. Here are all the field names you can get for IP related information. IP address, IP checksum, destination. You see what I told you? Like, you can't memorize all this. You just have to generally understand those fundamentals so that you can then look up for what you need. And then people are going to give you cheat sheets. There's a whole bunch, right? Like, every website's going to tell like, oh, you can do this, you can do that. You're going to come across those too. But how cool is Wireshark? For those of you, this is the first time you're seeing Wireshark. Isn't this a lot nicer? Also, a couple follows there too. Jalal and I am almost dead for real. Hope you're not dead. Thanks for the follows. DT is saying color and Wireshark packet type. Yeah, so a lot of little like cheat sheets. So you're going to see like there's color coding for a reason. Some of them are like dropped packets and such. But this is Wireshark. This is what we're going to be using now for protocol analysis. So Wireshark is to inspect packets on one's... no. So Wireshark is to perform protocol analysis on captured network traffic. Zeno's asking, how is it used on a corporate network? Wireshark would be used for... Here's an example. Say you have... Say that all of a sudden, for some reason, at like 7 p.m. every day, an entire subnet goes down. And then it comes back up like 2 minutes later. You would set up what's called a sniffer. And that sniffer would capture and mirror all the network traffic, like I said, somewhere along like the router. And you would capture all that network traffic, and then you would save it as a file, like a PCAP. And then you could bring it inside of Wireshark for individual analysis to see, like, when did the host go down? When did it come back up? What protocols happened during this time? So you would use it for, like, analysis and debugging and troubleshooting. You would also use it for forensics. So if you had a capture of a like malware, like a live like an actual attack happening, like an incident, and you captured it, then you would bring that here inside of your PCAP and try to figure out like all the network forensics, what happened. So this is a DFIR tool. This is a digital forensics and incident response tool. It's a network analysis and troubleshooting diagnostics tool, and it's also just a general research and study tool. Yeah. Now you could go to like malware traffic analysis. So you can go to like malware traffic analysis, and there's like websites like this where they'll offer you captured network traffic for you to perform like learning purposes. So here's like a capture of like dark gate activity. Bearded saying, how do you interpret an IOC in this thing? Well, it's all relative. It's all relative, Bearded. So like if I... And we're going to look into that. I don't want to get too ahead just yet. We're actually going to be doing some anomaly detection over here, and we're going to actually find out how to extract and find a captured Windows binary that was downloaded that was malicious. So we're going to get there by the end of this section. Yeah, super cool. First things first, we need to learn how to use the tool. But that's like a little bit of an intro to Wireshark, at least at a high level there. Yeah, thanks, Doug. So a sniffer, a physical device? Yeah, no, it's not necessarily a physical device. Yeah. So, like, when I loaded Wireshark, so watch what I'm doing on the screen right now. I have this Ethernet. I'm going to close that filter. I'm going to open up example.com. Oh, I should have... here, actually, let me close Wireshark. I'll start from the beginning to show you this. Find in local interfaces, and what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to hold shift and select them all, and then I'm going to hit the little blue shark button over here to start recording, and that's actually, I'm sniffing the network right now, and I'm going to go to like example.com a couple times. Actually, I'll go to like some new websites, effect.com. Example.com. Oh, and I'm going to stop this. And then I'm going to save. We're going to save this as sniffed network traffic. And it's going to save as, by default, as a PCAP-NG. So it's like a packet capture next generation file. So that's like a very advanced file format. We just call them PCAPs, but they're PCAP-NGs. And then I'm going to hit save. Actually, where did I save that? Let me double check. Desktop, okay. Minimize. And now you see this file here. That is a... what I just did was sniffing. And yeah, so Xeno is required that a NIC be in promiscuous mode. Yeah, some network interface cards require more advanced settings for you to be able to capture network traffic. Sometimes, yeah. Like promiscuous mode, some are by default able to capture. And then your network, you'd have to mess around with your other network appliances, like your switches and routers, to make sure that they could do that kind of stuff too. The reason being, if I hit properties, that was a couple seconds and that was an 8 megabyte file. It's big. Like it's a lot of data to do this kind of stuff. So by default, these kind of things are not normally enabled. You have to go and change some settings around. You can look at the documentation for your interface or for your switches and routers. But that's what I've done there. Now, if I close Wireshark, and you can see this is already stored as like a PCAP-NG file. If I double click it, by default, if Wireshark is installed, we can just interpret it right away. Now we have a full like network forensics file that we can do investigation on. So forth. I think it missed some of the traffic, yeah. So what we're gonna do inside of our labs now, we're gonna move over to C drive, Foundations lab data, and network traffic analysis, and we've actually provided you a bunch of PCAPs of captured network traffic for us to do our exercise and analysis on. Pretty cool. I'm just going to be right back like 1 second. Just got to get a little bit more water. No ads. Just be right back. Okay, cool. Alrighty. Okay, so we're going to move over now to the ARP analysis lab. So that's this one over here. And we're going to open up the ARP PCAP-NG file. We're going to do some analysis and see what all this stuff actually looks like. So we talked about ARP. Let's see what ARP actually looks like. We can double click that. It's going to open up inside of Wireshark, and it's just a couple packets over here for us to inspect. So remember, ARP. Eric, thanks for today's. Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, for sure. Have a good rest of the day. We're going to be here for another like half an hour or so. 20 minutes, I think, actually. So let's take a look at ARP together, and we're going to see that ARP, remember, is effectively a protocol to map IP addresses to MAC addresses, and it's working at layer 2. So when devices are trying to connect to each other by IP address, but they don't have it, then they do an ARP request. So that's the first thing. So in this packet here, we can actually see some ARP broadcasts that are happening on an actual network. So let's walk through it. Actually, before I do that, I think it's funny because like it actually gets summarized on an info column. And this is literally what ARP is doing. Who has 192.168.1.26? Tell me. Tell 192.168.1.14. That's ARP. That's actually what's happening. That's all it's doing. Hey, who has this? Tell me. Yeah, it's life of its own. It's just like chilling out. ARP, ARP, ARP. So let's kind of walk through this. Our first frame over here, we can see that we're dealing with Ethernet. It's a 42 byte size request. Okay, so nothing that fancy ever on this. And this would look like Wi-Fi. If we had Wi-Fi or other types of signals, that would be like the first layer. So here we go. Let's walk through this together. So, broadcast. This is a broadcast address. FFF across the board is a broadcast MAC ARP request. Kind of like the 255, 255, 255. And we can see over here that the destination is everyone on the network. That's what that means. It's yelling at everyone on the network. Hey, who has this IP address? And the source is coming from what looks like gigabyte 6 AEBD. So you see that right over on this little header right here. And Wireshark has actually done something really cool. It interpreted 74 D435 as gigabyte. So let's go and I'm going to add some things to columns. Source. Go. Here's the actual address. So destination and source coming up over here. And we can see that the ARP protocol request header, and these things are called headers of their own. And a header contains like little segments of data. So we can see that this is an IPv4 protocol type request, and here's my sender MAC address, and here is my sender IP. And here, like, we don't know the MAC address, so the target IP address is where we want to go, right? So it's saying, and this we can see like the breakdown over there, right? Like who has 192.168.1.26? That's because the ARP protocol header has a segment saying the target IP address is 192.168.1.26, but I don't know the MAC address. So who is it? Who has this MAC address? And then the sender IP, we know because that's me, like that's us. But again, how does it know gigabyte? And Wireshark, it does its own interpretation. And so we could use tools like MAC address lookup. Hey, 6th degree, welcome back. So we could use something maybe like MAC lookup. That's a pretty... MAC lookup.app. Yeah, here you go. So this is a MAC address lookup. Let's go back inside of Windows. And what I want to do is I want to go and I want to get this value right here. Okay. Let's go inside here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go and we want to copy the value. So here's a website that is recording all of the various MAC addresses that could be registered to companies. And the first portion, let's actually, I'm going to cut that out for a moment. The first portion of the MAC address, the first half, is actually called the OUI. And that's called the Organizational Unique Identifier. This is unique to companies. That's what this means. So let's put this back. And let's do a lookup. Accept all. And by looking up this MAC address online, we can see a couple different things. We can see the OUI has been registered to Gigabyte Technology, and here's the address. This MAC address is actually registered to this city in Taiwan. And they are allocated 2 to the power of 24. They have 16 million MAC addresses that they could work with. That's what's been allotted to them, at least according to this. Last updated in 2015, initial registration in July 2013. Now, this could be spoofed. All we need to do is when we're making the request, and this is advanced for much later, but you see, this is where you could go and change your network request and say, actually, MAC.source address is equal to like 771122. Like you can make it up. The network traffic is not going to tell you what you can and cannot do. It just cares if you format the data. But that's how Wireshark was actually able to interpret this. It looked at the source MAC address and it said, okay, I actually know this portion. This is registered to Gigabyte. And then the last portion, the E6AEBD, is actually the unique MAC address like interface registered to the company for this network card. So let's see. We're going to go and add a couple more columns. So I want to do, so we have sender MAC. I'll actually apply that as a column. I'm going to get rid of this column over here. And I want to also see sender IP address. Let's add that as a column. And then target MAC address. Let's add that as a column. And same with target IP. You can kind of see like the talking happening here as well. So the first packet here, sender IP is 114. It hits .26, and it wants to know. Sorry, it wants to know who has .26. Okay. Now we have another series of the packet resolution over here, and it's saying, well, who has .31? So they got their response. And now we're also trying to figure out who has .31, who has .26, and who has .31 again. Now, what's interesting is that look at the frequency of this actually happening on the network. 0, 1 second pretty much, and then another second after that. It's happening at like a 1 second interval. ARP is really, really noisy. Super noisy. It happens all the time on a network. But this is ARP in action. We're just looking for IP addresses. Sorry, we're just looking for the MAC addresses, and we shout out at the IP address because that's what we put inside of our browser. So like if I was trying to connect to 192.168.1.31, if I send this request, it's going to create an ARP protocol request. It's going to shout out on the network, hey, I need the MAC address of that IP address. Who has it? And then everyone's going to get the message, and then they're going to respond back and be like, oh, wait. Actually, I'm .31. Cool, here's my MAC address. Now let's speak through MAC. It's a lot faster, easier to manage. This is a lot easier to understand now, right? Like now that you can... So we've talked about it. We've talked about like the OSI model and layers. We've talked about different protocols. We talked about this at like a process flowchart level, but what a difference now, right? Does this... I guess I should ask chat, like, are you starting to see like how this is all layered? Is it easier to kind of understand what we're talking about as a result of what we previously learned? And is it also easier now to visualize because you can go from like a line by line, header by header, segment by segment, packet by packet view of what's actually happening on the network? Super cool. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, Karina. Yeah. It brings the protocols to life. Triple T cross. Yeah, right? It's... Instead of just being like, oh, I'm going to go learn networking. I'm just going to go start with Wireshark. Yeah. Yeah, now this stuff actually is coming to life. You can see it. You can interact with it. You can capture it. It has like a physical sense. Remember when we did the first class of networking, I said it's going to be very hard at first because it's completely abstract and you can't touch it or really see it, like it's out of view. So it's juggling a lot of like mental, it's like a lot of mental gymnastics, kind of making it all connecting, looking at visualizations. But once we get through that kind of hurdle and map it out the best we can, now we can just start actually, now we have a visual interface. Cool. Very, very cool. think I'll stop. That's probably a good spot to stop at today. Like, we just introduced Wireshark by the end. And then we can do a deep dive into the... There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 labs to do tomorrow. And then I think that's... We'll wrap up networking there. And then Doug will do a walkthrough next Saturday of some fun stuff. And then we'll do the start of Windows Enterprise Network right after that on the Sunday. And then we're going to do more Windows Enterprise Network the following Saturday, and then Career Prep 1. So kind of going through the streams. And then we'll have Help Desk after that. Pretty cool. And then by the end of that, yeah, like, you're going to have such a solid base of networking and IT knowledge. There is nothing stopping you from going and applying to, like, entry-level IT work, honestly. So Karina saying initially, network was very not fun. Yeah. Now it's, like, yeah, it's... Networking is super fun, super interesting. Once you understand how everything works and why like that, yeah, some diagrams, hopping inside a Wireshark, poking around. Networking is super cool. Yeah, Enterprise is going to be good, KS. You're all going to be able to go through Windows Enterprise Network to the point that you should be able to get through it enough then to kind of like build your own home lab at home after, through everything we've learned. And you should be able to, like, to pass like a technical interview from like an IT help desk interview, like a take-home exam or like a take-home technical or on a whiteboard, I'd say. Cool. Let's pause there. Let's stop there for the day. Cool. That's a wrap for the day, everyone. SOC 100 crew. Thank you very much for being here with me today. Starting to get deeper inside of networking. Hope you all enjoyed. Had some good interaction in chat. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for the support as always, for engagement, good questions, and all that participation. I enjoy it. I really enjoy doing this. So thank you again for spending your time, your Saturday with me, going over these concepts. And we will see you tomorrow for SOC 100 Class 11. More networking action. And let's just keep going. Let's keep going right to the end. Thank you, everyone. Have yourself a good rest of Saturday. We'll see you on Discord for the rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning or afternoon or evening. Have a good one.